Hi, this is Gurasi Singh, and you're listening to my Thick Accent podcast. So, on this podcast, we have invited all kinds of people belonging to various cultures and roles and domains, each with their unique stories that have left us inspired and intrigued. Today, however, we are about to embark on a journey into the perspective that holds a world of its own, the first generation immigrant experience. In a tapestry woven with dreams, challenges, and the courage to forge a new path, our guest today brings us a story that reflects the vibrant hues of a first generation immigrant's life. Stepping across borders, cultures, and languages, her narrative sheds light on the unique blend of heritage and hope that defines the journey of those who venture to call a new land home. We'll uncover the intricate layers of her background, the echoes of her roots, and the aspirations that led her family to a new horizon. Join us as we explore the trials and triumphs of carving an identity amidst the tapestry of diversity. Through her lens, we learn about the nuances of navigating language, tradition, and the balance between heritage and newfound belonging as she shares the vibrant mosaic that defines her path as a first generation immigrant. Please welcome Karen.
Hello, Grasses. Thank you for having me. What an introduction. I am impressed. Thank you for having me. My name is Karen, and I am super happy to be here to talk with you and discuss on everything first generation immigration.
Awesome. Welcome to the podcast, Karen. And I must tell my listeners that she's not the classic Karen. I've had the opportunity to know her, I think from past many months now. We have had various conversations, and it's always been a pleasure talking to you. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Okay. So I asked Karen, some of my guests, this question that what is this one habit they adopted that has changed their life or something that has become their second nature?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. What have I adopted? I think just being kind. Maybe that's a weird answer, but for some people, it might be a bit harder for them to be kind. But being kind is free. It doesn't cost anything. And putting anger and hatred takes up so much of your energy than being kind, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so naturally, just being kind and thoughtful towards others has become second nature to me.
Yeah, I like that answer actually. I don't find it weird at all. I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes people forget to acquire, I would say, and they sometimes just forget that everybody comes from with different experiences and different challenges might they be going through. The least you can do is be kind to them, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
definitely agree. Yeah, being kind is I think it's the pinnacle for all relationships, all connections in life in order to create more meaning
Yeah.
to each other's
Absolutely.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Love that answer. Okay, so Karen, let's just start from the start. You were born in the UK to immigrant parents who moved from Vietnam. Tell us a little bit about your time in London, if you have any recollection or any stories that your parents have shared with you of why and when they moved to UK.
Yeah, of course. So I was born in UK. I lived there for 6 years. My parents, they weren't there. They immigrated to UK from Hong Kong, actually. So they're originally Vietnamese. They're from Vietnam, but then they went to Hong Kong. They met in Hong Kong, and from Hong Kong, they signed up to immigrate in these um, high developing countries,
Okay.
including they had the choice to go to Canada, US, or the UK. And in this case, they chose UK.
Okay.
And they established there end of 80s, the 80s.
Mhm.
And then my older brother was born, and then I was born thereafter. And we stayed there for until I was 6, so until 2001.
Mhm.
Um, and from there, I moved to Canada, and I've been in Canada ever since.
Mhm.
So in the UK, actually, I think it was my most happiest times that I
Mm.
ever.
Okay.
Um, I think because naturally, as you go older, you become more self-aware, and then you encounter more problems. And as you go older, you get more responsibility, so life becomes more complicated. But as a
Yeah.
child, I feel like that's when you remember the best times of your life because you're not worrying about anything, right?
Yeah.
As children. So I actually remember where I lived. I remember
Hmm.
the setting of my house that I was living in. I remember like this convenience store that we would go to.
Hmm.
And my dad, like at the time, he spoke good English. Now he doesn't. As because he hasn't been using English as much
Hmm.
um, in his community, but or at his work. But at the time, I think he spoke decent English, and he was conversating with strangers. There was a lot of immigrants around that time as well. So
Okay.
I think both of my parents were comfortable being out there in society compared to
Hmm.
now.
Okay.
Um, And so I remember going to the convenience store, and then the owner there, he like I was only like 4 years old at the time, I
Yeah.
think, but he picked me up. And I don't know this man, but he picked me up as if I was his child and like just talking to me. I remember that so clearly. And then I remember going to the grocery store and going through the ice cream aisle and like that scent of
Yeah.
like going into the freezer section. I remember so clearly that every time I go to the freezer section or every time I smell that, I get that scent from the
Oh
freezer
wow.
section, it literally reminds me of that grocery store in UK back then.
Hmm.
Um, so I honestly do have fond memories when I did live in England.
Hmm.
And I cherish them really, really a lot. And I do plan on going back eventually and visiting where I used to live and
Okay.
just create some sort of memory or have something back in England for
Hmm.
myself once I get older.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do plan on wanting to like stay there for maybe a month,
Okay.
just to revisit London as a grown adult.
Hmm. Sound very, very interesting. Were there like any certain families or friends that you were visiting all the time?
Yeah, so basically, my parents chose the UK because at the time my dad's brothers were living
Okay.
there, and then my mother's sister was living there. So my aunt and my uncles. So we would visit them here and there, but it was so far of a drive, probably like 45 minutes of a drive. So we visit them probably, I'd say every 2 months or so.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't really have fond memories of creating a relationship with them. I just remember like showing up to their place and getting to know my cousins and eating there, but I don't remember in details what happened.
Okay. And do you have any recollection of the earlier education, your school, or anything?
Yeah, I actually do. So when we lived in a neighborhood where the elementary school was probably 2 blocks away,
Hmm.
and every single morning, my mom or my dad, either or, they would walk me and my older brother to school.
Okay.
And every single morning, and I think I left when I was 6, so I guess I was in that elementary school for like a year and a half, 2 years before I
Hmm.
came to Canada. So we would go, like they would walk us to school. We would line up, and then I don't recall like what happened in class because I was so young, but I do recall making like friends and like a best friend there. I remember her name. It's just I don't remember her last name. Which is funny, which is so funny. But I tried to look up her last name. I think a month ago on Facebook.
Okay.
I can't recall to this day. But her first name, I remember it so well. Um, but she was my best friend at the time, and we were
Hmm.
super close. And I remember me being part of a play
Okay.
for like Christmas. And I remember like every morning we would have breakfast. We would go into this mini building next to the elementary school, and we
Hmm.
would all have breakfast all together and then go to the main classroom. That is the extent of what I remember from my elementary days then.
Wow, still a lot of details you remember. That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
know, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Of course, I'm sure it is. So tell us what influenced the family or what influenced the decision of the family to move to Canada.
So the reason why we moved to Canada is because my mom also has another brother, so my other uncle who lives here. She has two brothers actually here
Mhm.
in Canada, in Montreal at the
Oh,
time,
wow.
and they were well established. Her older brother, so my uncle,
Mhm.
um, he was the most established out of my mother's family. So he, in a way, kind of convinced her and um, supported her to come here.
Mm.
And so she decided to, even though we had my aunt over there in the UK, which is my
Mhm.
mom's sister, I think my mom felt more compelled to come to Canada. So my dad naturally was open to it as well. So that's why we came to Canada afterwards
Mm.
in 2001. Yeah.
And do you remember your first day, or does your parents have any stories that they shared with you of the first day or the initial days that you landed?
Yeah. Well, the first time I landed it was just me and my mom. Um,
Okay.
and then my dad and my brother would come later. But it was me and my mom first, and I remember literally I was entering the airport in
Mhm.
like the Canada Montreal's airport, and then obviously there's a lot of people like welcoming their
Yeah.
relatives, right? I think we had like 20 people welcoming just me and my mom. I was so
No way.
shy. Yeah, I had literally 20 people, all my cousins, all my aunts and
Oh,
uncles,
wow.
everybody was there, and it was just they were welcoming just me and my mom, and I guess it was an exciting time, right? um
Yeah.
to like have a relative who wants to come and live with them, live in the same country. So there were 20 people just like welcoming us, and I remember walking. My mom was holding the cart with the baggage, like just
Yeah.
pushing it, and I was behind her, and half my face was shown
Mm.
because I was shy. I was so shy. There were so many people. I was so overwhelmed. And the first thing that happened when I literally was introduced to them was
Yeah.
my uncle, my mom's oldest brother. He
Yeah.
picked me up, and he
Hmm.
was so happy to see me. He picked me up, and I was scared, right? I don't know who he was. It was my first time seeing him. I was
Yeah.
scared, but I knew my mom was there, so obviously, like I knew it was safe, even though I didn't know who he was. But he
Yeah.
picked me up, and then everybody like circled around me and just wanted to like touch me and hug me and just acknowledge me. And then I think from then that day on, I don't remember like what happened. I know we went like to eat. I
Yeah.
remember my uncle, the first I think few months I was there, he drove me to Tim Hortons. He
Okay.
told me that, Karen, you have to try this. This is the
Yeah.
staple of Canada. I'm like, what is it? He's like, it's Tim Hortons. I'm like, okay. So it was a field trip going to Tim Hortons. And Tim Hortons, you see it almost every corner, right?
Every corner. Yeah.
Yeah. So he drove just me and my brother to Tim Hortons.
Hmm.
And that was like for him, an introduction to the Canadian culture.
Of
Um,
course. Yeah.
yeah. So I remember vividly that trip.
Wow, 20 people welcoming you on the airport. That's incredible. I think
Yeah.
we guys, when come here, I remember me that I saw my cousins, like they came to visit me from Toronto to Montreal, like I think 10 days after I landed. And I was super happy to see just those two people. I can't even imagine how you would be feeling with 20 people welcoming you at the airport. And then you said that
Yeah.
they all were coming and hugging and kissing you and meeting you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you think you still have that trauma with you that, oh my God, who are these people? So many people are right there
No,
with you.
no, because the thing is, our family is so big.
Yeah.
From that moment on, we would have like monthly gatherings. So I would
Hmm.
see them so frequently that
Oh,
it
wow.
became second nature to me to know who they were. And our family is pretty like extensive. Like
Hmm.
you know your cousins, you get your cousins' spouses, their
Yeah.
kids, and everything. So it's
Hmm.
very very big, and you see them on a monthly basis at that time. So I was very comfortable with them soon after.
So speaking of that culture and everything, of course, like the culture in the UK and Canada, people might think it's similar, but obviously it's very different, right? But tell us like some of the aspects of like your new cultural experience that you found most surprising or different from your own or even from the UK.
I mean, of course, I was like pretty young
Mm-hmm.
when I left the UK. So I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
self-aware enough to like make a distinction of what the kind of culture it was. But
Yeah.
looking back, I think people in Montreal are a lot more welcoming um,
Hmm.
to different nationalities. In the area that I was living in the UK, it was more like mainly I don't know if this is politically correct to say, but it was a lot of brown people, Pakistani,
Of course, it's
Indian.
correct.
Okay,
We all
okay.
are brown, so
Okay, good.
yeah.
So yeah, a lot of brown people, a lot of Asian in that community, and there wasn't any other race that I would see where I was living in the UK.
Okay.
I mean, of course, there's like Caucasian, right? But
Yeah.
it was predominantly Indian, brown, Pakistani
Hmm.
people, and then a
Hmm.
mix of Asian. But mostly, like I was mostly introduced to like brown people.
Okay.
So coming here in Canada, like I saw more different cultures. Even like we see African American culture, we see more Caucasians, we see
Hmm.
French, the
Hmm.
language on top of that. So I think in terms of culture, it's more spread, it's more diversified in
Hmm.
Montreal
Yeah.
than in UK. I mean, I might be wrong. If I go back to UK, it might be the kind of the similar culture.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, the language, well, the accent.
Mm.
I mean, um, this accent is different, but because I kind of knew English then, for me, it wasn't hard to understand English here. It was
Of
just my
course.
accent that changed because as children, you kind of pick up on a lot of different things, and
Absolutely.
so I naturally lost my British accent, but
Hmm.
and so I have this more Canadian accent living here over time.
Can you still do that British accent though?
Yeah, I can still do it.
Okay. So, earlier when you were talking about your life in the UK, I just picked on this one point. I want to circle back again on. You said that your father used to use English a lot back then, but he doesn't use it enough now. Tell us, what did you mean by that?
So back then, we didn't have, not to my knowledge, there wasn't a big community of Vietnamese people that my parents were integrated in or they were a part of.
Okay.
They didn't know who to reach out or how to reach to these Vietnamese community,
Hmm.
or they weren't in need of it at the time. But
Hmm.
I think they were in the mindset of exploring and being more adventurous and very in a state of uh, not in a state, but they were more in a place where they were uncomfortable. So they had to like get out there to
Mm.
find solutions to resolve issues. So they were more, I would say, outgoing.
Okay.
Now moving here, well, we have a lot more, even though we did have family back in the UK, we have
Hmm.
more family and more support in Montreal, in Canada, Montreal. So
Hmm.
because of that, these support systems, so basically my relatives, they already have these Vietnamese communities built. And
Mm.
so they
Yeah.
integrated my parents into it. And naturally, my parents felt more comfortable with these
Yeah.
communities and started to hang out around these communities that spoke just Vietnamese. And
Okay.
so naturally, they found jobs through these people. And so they didn't feel the need to venture out on on their own because they're no longer on their own as much compared to the UK.
Hmm.
So being integrated in these communities allowed them to feel more comfortable in their skin and probably reminded them of their home country. And for that reason, I think they got used to it. And my dad didn't feel the need to use the English language as much because he already found a job through
Yeah.
these relatives. And these relatives, they speak in Vietnamese at their job. So he didn't feel the need to use English. So
Mm.
naturally, when you don't use a language or you don't use anything in general, you kind of lose that skill set over time.
Hmm. Yeah. That's very fascinating for me to know, because I think all this time I've heard stories where people have integrated into the society, and because Punjabi is widely spoken here and there. Just what I thought. But this is very fascinating to know that even Vietnamese is also spoken, and there is jobs and work in the same language as well.
Yes, yes, there is. And I think it's a good thing. That's why it's good to always be part of communities because you learn a
Yeah.
lot and you get networking. But it's also puts you kind of in a box when you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think it's always a balance, I find. So
Yeah.
in my case, in the case of my parents, they got used to it, and they didn't feel the need to use English. And then as I grew older,
Mhm.
me and my brother, as their kids, we would be their main translator for things if they did need help.
Yeah. And you also said that your mother was also more comfortable to go out back then in UK and integrate in the society. This is this. Do you would say like this is one of those reasons that she doesn't go out too much now?
Yeah. So back then, because she didn't know, she was, I guess, wanted to be adventurous, and she
Mm-hmm.
would walk us to school. She would talk to these parents here and there, and she apparently knew English super well. She learned it
Mm-hmm.
back in Hong Kong, and she used it a lot more in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there was no Vietnamese communities that was created for her at the
Yeah.
time, so she had to use the other language that she knows, which was English. So same kind of concept as my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
when she came to Montreal, Canada, again, we have these communities. She became more comfortable with them
Mm-hmm.
and didn't feel the need to use English.
And what about the kids? Was there like an intentional effort to instill the Vietnamese language, or you just picked it up in the house?
So my parents wanted me to go to Vietnamese school, meaning
Okay.
we went to this language school once a week.
Okay.
And it started from grade 1 till grade, I think, 7 or 8. And in my case, me and my brother, we went to that school for up until grade 6.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it was a weekly thing, and I was excelling
Okay.
in that school. Like I don't know why, but I really put an effort to like make sure I get 100% in those like written tests or verbal
Mm-hmm.
tests, and I was excelling in Vietnamese school. And from there, I'm thankful that I did learn it.
Yeah.
Um, but you will actually see like a lot of um, not kids, a lot of adults my age, around my age, who are Vietnamese. A portion of them don't know Vietnamese as well because
Yeah.
they either never went to school or parents didn't really speak that language too much to them
Mm-hmm.
at the time. But my parents, because I went to Vietnamese school, I can read, write, and uh, like understand Vietnamese fluently.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's how I learned Vietnamese. And then my parents just speak to me in Vietnamese, right? They don't speak
Of
to
course.
me in
Yeah.
English or French. So that's how
Yeah.
I also like get
Yeah.
to upkeep this language.
It's so great that these immigrant does make that effort to instill that language. And for example, in your case, they asked you to go to the school and learn the language. This is really
Yeah.
nice just to keep the language intact and still present within the family. And I'm sure like you will sort of do the same thing to your next generations as well. Because I do speak to few immigrants, and I think everybody I've spoken to so far on the podcast, everybody, literally everybody has made that effort to instill their respective languages in their children. And that is, I think, definitely the thing to do.
Yes, I totally agree. I would totally do it when one day I have kids. But
Yeah.
my younger brother, so I have a younger brother, and my parents didn't instill it in him to go to Vietnamese school. So he didn't go
Okay.
to Vietnamese school. So he doesn't know the language as well as I did at his age.
Okay.
Um, but he does learn it through my parents who speak to him in Vietnamese, but
Of
he's
course. Yeah.
not as fluent or he can't write or he can't read Vietnamese. So it really depends on the parenting style and
Yeah.
what the parents want from the kids over time.
So let's just talk a little bit about, the cultural celebrations and traditions that were their parents making like that effort to, celebrate all occasions, all festivals. Like in our case, like I think we celebrate, for example, the Diwali, which is like a major festival, Indian festival we have, and many other, religious small occasions we also celebrate. Were your family also like growing up in your formative years, were they doing that as well?
Yeah, so we were celebrating, like we would have monthly gatherings, just to like
Okay.
hang out and chill. But
Hmm.
there were like main events that would happen. So like Chinese New Year's, for example, even though it's called Chinese,
Mm.
but I'm Vietnamese, but we celebrate Chinese New
Yeah.
Year.
Okay.
That would be like the biggest event of the year, and we would celebrate it within our family.
Hmm.
I think I think that's one of the main holidays that we celebrate. I can't recall anything else that's major.
Hmm.
Um, but we do celebrate like birthdays and like, I guess
Yeah.
Christmas, those
Of course.
regular
Yeah.
holidays, Canadian holidays. We do celebrate them, but
Hmm.
not, we don't put as much importance as to like Chinese New Year's, for example.
Hmm. Okay. And is there like a particular tradition or maybe even like a festival apart from, the Chinese New Year that you have preserved with yourself, that you have uh like adopted that, or something that is like close to you, for example, anything, any certain, maybe like a traditional attire, maybe like uh, a certain cuisine or certain food, anything that you really find really close to you.
From my culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the food, like I cook um, Vietnamese food and I know how to cook it.
Hmm.
Um, and the fact that I know the language and I understand it, I can like
Yeah.
look up recipes and understand what they're saying and find more intrinsic, like harder recipes to make. So
Hmm.
I think that's one thing that I kind of picked up and will always keep within me to,
Okay.
because the thing is, when we have these monthly gatherings, all
Hmm.
the women would be in the kitchen and just cook together, and it'd
Hmm.
be that way, their way of socializing and
Hmm.
make connections.
And it would be the authentic Vietnamese food.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
authentic Vietnamese food, and they would just literally chit chat while cooking, and their way of celebrating the culture on a monthly
Mm.
basis. And so I feel like food is what brings people together
Yeah.
in any like setting. So I find knowing Vietnamese food and knowing how it's cooked and what's required will be
Hmm.
something that I will always keep in my culture and bring forward to my kids.
Have you ever visited back in Vietnam?
Yes, I have. And the last time was in 2004. So a while
Wow, that's a
back.
long time ago.
Yeah, that's a long,
Yeah.
long time ago. Um, but yeah, I do love it when I go back, but I like to go back in a big family setting, so like the entire family, and
Mm.
it's been harder to make that happen in the past few
Hmm.
years. So for that reason, I haven't gone back, and I don't want to go back like with me and friends. I want to go back with my entire family and celebrate and be
Hmm.
together and reignite that culture, that Vietnamese culture, and
Yeah.
understand the family background more, but together
Hmm.
as a family rather than going by myself and discover on my own.
Yeah. Yeah, you were mentioning that your mom's siblings. You said that your aunt was in the UK. Your uncles are in Montreal. So, do you have any family left back in Vietnam, or everybody is just living abroad here and there?
No, we do have. I think we have one or two um, of my uncles and aunts. Actually, no
Okay,
more than that. Sorry, I just have so many that I can't keep up. Like on my dad's side, there's
of
six
course.
siblings, and then my mom's side, there are also six siblings. So I have
Mm.
cousins still in Vietnam. I have cousins in Canada. I have cousins in the UK.
Hmm.
So we still have family in the UK, Canada, and Vietnam.
Mm. Okay. Is there something, Karen, something that people don't know about Vietnam or the Vietnamese culture that you would like to share with us?
I mean, I think we all know this, but Vietnamese people
Hmm.
in the way that I was brought up, we are very
Yeah.
very hardworking. I mean, I know everybody is to an extent,
Yeah.
but we don't give up, um, and so we are very very hardworking, and we always make sure that we are aligned from a family point of view.
Hmm.
So we are very family oriented, very community oriented. I don't know if that's a word, but
Yeah.
we're very focused on that. Um, and hardworking at whatever we put our energy into.
Yeah. And it's also like a collectivistic society, right?
Yes, yes. In the
Yeah.
way that I was brought up. Yes.
Brought up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So let's just talk a little bit about the family dynamics and the experience I have had, speaking to Indians, more specifically the Punjabi first generation immigrants. I get to hear this a lot, that our parents are still stuck in the year they left India, they left Punjab, and they had not outgrown that certain ideologies. Tell us if you have had any certain experiences growing up.
I can tell you a recent one.
Okay.
I think in my experience, so
Yeah.
my parents, they got married at like 20, super young, and then they got
Mm.
kids early 20s. Um, and so at this age that I'm at, I should be married according to them, according to their
Yeah.
culture. I should have kids by now, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I think their mentality uh, is, oh, why aren't you married at this age?
Mm.
What happened? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But like, I don't take offense to it. I get it because that's how they were brought up. Like
Yeah.
everybody around their age got married at the same time.
Of
So
course.
for them to see this more westernized, more modern way of living is different.
Hmm.
They ask me here and there, but I don't pay attention to it because it is my path, it is my journey, it is my way of
Mm.
living, and I'm content with the decisions I've made.
Hmm.
Um, but for sure, it's in the back of their head. Like they're probably worried why I'm not married.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but I will know in due time it will happen. So I'm
Yeah.
not worried about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty common. Again, one of the conversations I have with many people, around my age, our age, and I think all those South Asian communities also. And then you are sharing your example as well. This is a common conversation.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
times are gone when you are supposed to get married at like 20 and have children by 23, and then another child by 25, and then just
Yeah,
wait for retirement.
yeah,
Those days
exactly.
are gone.
Yes.
I think also because we millennials, especially Karen, got exposed to so much, like our parents can't even fathom the fact there's something called internet, right? Back then,
Hmm.
probably. And
Yeah,
especially in my parents, I would say, like I'm the youngest in the family, and my sisters, actually I have two sisters, and they got married at the age of like
yeah,
early 20s sometime, and they always do question me as well, and I'm like, come on, gone are those days. It's
yeah.
not the norm anymore, and it will happen when it's due. You can't
Hmm.
force these things to happen anymore, so I can
Yeah,
totally relate with you.
yeah. Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Do you ever get pressured over time? Do you still feel pressured from these questions, or you're like indifferent?
Well, I don't think so. I'm indifferent. I think I do get pressurized as well, because these are common questions, right? I think all my friends also kind of are asked these questions, and it's hard to sometimes uh explain the parents as well that what is something which is holding me back, and it's not, it's like I think we have had discussions earlier as well. I think it's not the time right now. We have things to do,
Yeah,
we have things to figure
yeah,
out, and it will
yeah.
happen in its due time. You can't force these things to happen. Just because everybody is doing it, you don't have to do it. It's okay.
Hmm.
It will happen
Yeah.
whenever it's supposed to. There's a right
Yes.
time for everything. So yeah, I think I do have that banter with my parents at times, but at the same time, I think I'll acknowledge their understanding, because they do understand me, and they do understand that, okay, fine, we know that it will happen its own time, and we can't ask the same question 100 times. So I think they are
Yeah.
also evolving, but I think I've
Hmm.
said it multiple times on the podcast that they are the product of their own time, and they just try to do what they were taught or they have seen whole their
Yeah.
life, and it's very difficult to change their
Very.
ideologies in which they have grown up. So, yeah, that's
Hmm.
how I would answer
I
that.
agree.
Hey, if you're enjoying the content and conversations we bring to you every week, we would love for you to join our growing community. Make sure to follow us on all major podcast directories, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcast. That way, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll always stay in the loop with the latest insights and stories. And speaking of staying connected, I always encourage you to follow your heart, but also us on Instagram. The handle is My Thick Accent. We'll be sharing a lot more behind the scenes content, some updates, and some even fun sneak peeks. So give us a follow and let's engage even more closely there. And to all those who provided their feedback and input, thank you so much. It truly shaped the direction of our podcast. And I would love to hear from any of the new folks who joined us today. Don't hesitate to reach out with any thoughts, ideas, or even suggestions for future guests. Drop us an email at hello@mythickaccent.com. Now let's get back to the episode. So let's just talk about, your education, obviously, and a little bit about the career path. And you were telling me that when you came here, you had to go to a French school, even though your parents were Anglophone. Actually, I did a little bit of research and also spoke to somebody, and they told me that if you are Anglophone, you are allowed to go to an English school. So I'm not sure what was the norm back then when you came, that you, even though your parents were Anglophones, but you still had to go to the French school. So tell us about that time. And you were also telling me that you also failed the very first grade. Tell us about that time.
Yeah. So the reason why I had to go learn French is because my parents did not go to an English speaking school. They didn't go to school.
Hmm.
So because it didn't, for you to go to an English school here in Montreal at the time, your parents you have to either be born in Canada,
Hmm.
or your parents have had to go to an English speaking school in order
Hmm.
for you to go, for you to enter an English school. So
Okay.
I was neither. I was straight up an immigrant into
Yeah.
Canada. So I had to be put into a French school.
Hmm.
And actually, for the first month, I did go to an English school
Hmm.
and we did try it. But the thing is, I guess my parents weren't too knowledgeable about the rules. But I did go to English elementary school and I was there for a month and a half and they kicked me out.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, I mean, they didn't literally kick me out. They just packed up my stuff and they said bye
Huh.
to me. I didn't know what that meant. And I told my parents, like, hey, I said, they gave me all my school stuff.
But why did they do that?
Like, why did the school do that?
Yeah.
Well, because they're not allowed to host immigrants who didn't have parents who went to English school. It was
Hmm.
against the law to have kids.
Okay.
It was against the law. I think my parents just put me into an English school without knowing the rules and
Okay.
regulations at the time.
Got it.
And then as I got enrolled in the first month, that's when we all realized that I was not doing a not legal student being in an English school. So
Yeah.
they kicked me out nicely. And then I went into French elementary school, and I had to restart. I did first grade and second grade in accueil. Accueil would in English would be like a welcoming class where they would host
Okay.
students who who have trouble knowing or learning French,
Okay.
or had more difficulties to learn the new
Hmm.
language. So I was put in accueil the first and second grade.
Hmm.
First grade, the thing is when you're in accueil first grade, if you pass, then you go into regular second grade. But because
Okay.
in a way I wasn't good enough, I kind of failed in that sense,
Hmm.
first grade, and then I went to accueil second grade. And then when I finished the accueil second grade, I was put into regular second grade. So
Hmm.
I didn't even go up to third grade regular. I basically failed my second grade essentially. Um,
Yeah.
so failing that, I don't think it really made an impact to me at the time, because I guess as a child, you just
Yeah.
you just try to pass and go on to the next level. But
Absolutely.
looking back, um, I think it was a good thing. I mean, I'm grateful for whatever happened to get me to where I am now. But
Yeah.
uh, I just recall making a lot of friends in that accueil class, and then
Hmm.
feeling more comfortable than say like in a regular class, because we all had the same
Of
struggles in
course.
a way. And so
Absolutely.
we had these obstacles that we had to get together and try to surpass them together.
Hmm.
And even though we don't speak the same language, there was like multiple different nationalities in that
Mm-hmm.
classroom, even though we don't know the same language. With our goal was the same, which is to get better in French. So I think,
Mm.
in a sense, I felt more belonged. I felt belonged in that setting, in that accueil class. But afterwards, I felt more comfortable knowing French. But
Mm-hmm.
that was the time that I felt the most belonged and most comfortable at that age.
Okay. Are you friends with anybody still from that class?
Actually, I am friends with one person,
Okay.
but I don't think she recalls that we went to that same class.
Hmm.
Nor did I ever brought it up, but we're friends, but we don't see each other that often, maybe once every 3 years.
Okay. But after that, when you got into your third grade, you were also telling me that you were not comfortable speaking to your classmates. Tell us about that. Why?
So I think in elementary school, it wasn't made aware to me that I was uncomfortable with French. It was only in high school that it was made aware to
Okay.
me that I felt uncomfortable speaking French. So in elementary,
Hmm.
I was like just doing my courses. I was not doing well in French classes, but I still,
Okay.
put in effort and stuff. And thankfully passed and went into high school. And then going into high school, that's when you meet different people, different classes. You meet like, I don't know,
Yeah.
400 students, right, in the same grade as you in high school, um, from different like class, from different like um, ethnicity and
Hmm.
different interests. You meet like so many students, and so over time I kind of became uncomfortable speaking French because I had an accent.
Hmm.
Meaning, well, I had an accent, and I also had to find my words a lot in French compared to
Hmm.
English. um, so going to high school, I was comfortable in English, but I was uncomfortable speaking French. And so being uncomfortable speaking French, I wasn't socializing with students as much. I was more in my corner by choice,
Yeah.
and I felt comfortable being in my corner. And sometimes my classmates would think that I just don't like them because I'm not talking to them. But little do they know is because I I feel shy, embarrassed of my
Yeah.
accent, of having to find my words, can't be as smooth as other people, comparing myself to
Hmm.
how they speak French. I was not, I didn't have the highest self confidence to speak
Yeah.
French. And for that reason, I retreated in high school a lot.
Yeah. Back then, they thought you were Karen way before the concept of Karen came in.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, literally. And honestly, when I look back, the friends that I
Yeah.
made in high school, the closest ones, are the ones that were very either understood English well or conversated
Hmm.
with me
Okay.
in English here and there, or
Yeah.
accepted me speaking English here and there over time. Like sometimes I would speak in English, or some words would come out in English, and some of the students in high school would kind of not be accepting of it, or they would just find it weird that I would,
Hmm.
or they wouldn't understand what I'm saying. So I would need to change my language in order for them to
Yeah.
understand. So yeah, most of my friends from high school are those that either really I communicated in English most of the time, or they understood my language barrier,
Hmm.
or they made me feel comfortable that it is okay to have a French accent.
Yeah. And you also mentioned earlier that Acai class, where you were learning French, was the only time you felt belonged than ever. Tell us, like, why would you say
Yeah.
that? That I think you were living in Montreal from 20 years, I believe, more than 20
Yes.
years actually,
Yeah.
but you still
Yeah.
think you felt belonged then and not now. Why would you say that?
Well, not that I don't feel belonged now, but I think
Yeah.
the most time that was a time where I felt vividly like there was no problems in the world. I felt the most at peace
Hmm.
at that age. So when that was first grade, second grade, first, second grade. So I was probably like early teens. I
Yeah.
don't know what, no, actually, no, that was like,
Actually, maybe like
sorry.
under 10
Yeah,
actually.
under 10,
Yeah.
essentially under 10. But because again, I wasn't self aware enough. I didn't have these issues growing up as an adult. So the only issue I had was going to school, making sure I was fed, and making friends. And all those requirements for me at the age was fulfilled. So
Hmm.
I felt belonged in that sense. And that's not to say, I don't feel belonged now. but for
Mm-hmm.
sure I didn't have whatever responsibilities and roles and issues that I encounter today at
Mm-hmm.
that age. So
Yeah.
feel belong now, but not as strongly as I was then because of the self awareness that I have
Mm-hmm.
acquired over time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what is something you think is sort of missing, or like a missing piece, which will make you feel more belonged? Or maybe do you think there is certain practice that you have to follow, then that will make you feel more belonged?
There is no, I don't think there will be anything that will make me feel more belonged. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the past, I think 5 years or so, I've become more
Mm-hmm.
self aware. And I heard this saying that this was like 5 years ago, but I heard it and it kind of it still resonates to me to this day. And the saying
Mm-hmm.
is, you belong wherever you go.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I kind of kept that mentality. And
Mm-hmm.
so wherever in an uncomfortable situation or like networking events, for example, where you have to
Yeah.
like be outspoken and like get yourself out there, I tell myself I belong, even though I know I don't. I
Mm.
know like it's hard to like integrate, but I tell myself I belong wherever I go, meaning
Mm.
I am comfortable with my skin, um, and with the skills that I have and
Mm-hmm.
the way that I am as a person, I can make myself know that
Yeah.
I belong. Like kind of brainwash myself that I belong,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel comfortable knowing doing that. I know that makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. I think that's very true. I like what you said, that this is all in your mind. We feel that we don't belong in certain situations, or for example, getting hired at an agency and you feel like, oh, am I like a diversity hire, for example? But it's not.
Yeah,
You actually belong there. You really have to inner dialogue with yourself that it's you who is stopping you from really feeling accepted, and it's you who's going to help you to feel more belonged. It's all in your
yeah,
mind. Yeah.
exactly. It's all in your
Yeah.
mind, and you have to let go of that fear that again, like me not being comfortable speaking French. If so, when I was in high school, I have a friend,
Mhm.
a classmate actually. He said at the end of our year when we were graduating, he said, "Karen, you never really liked me." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Because you never talk to me." I'm like, "No, we talk, but we don't have conversations."
Mhm.
And then I thought deep back into it. I'm like, well, I don't make conversations with him because when I don't feel comfortable speaking French. And
Mm.
so, knowing that, I didn't feel the need to explain it to him why he felt
Yeah.
like I didn't like him because I already knew I was comfortable in my skin in
Mhm.
that moment, that me not speaking French is how I feel like I could belong in that environment.
Talk us a little bit about your career choice. Also, because I have this question that we South Asians are asked to follow like a certain career path growing up. Oh, you have to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, etc., etc. Was there like a
Yeah.
similar conversation in your families that you have to follow a certain path?
Yeah. For sure. For me,
Okay,
they wanted us to be like a lawyer, doctor,
engineer.
not less engineer at the time, but yeah,
Okay.
very high like high paying jobs or high rewarding jobs to
Mhm.
society. But so what I did over time is that when I was entering college, so CJEP, which is after
Yeah.
high school, they you have to choose if you want to go into like science or business, and I chose science for the
Hmm.
first semester, and I got into science in CJEP, and the first semester I hated it, and it was a battle between what I wanted and what my parents wanted, and in the
Okay.
end I chose business, and I felt so much more at peace making that decision, and I knew that no matter how mad they would be they or unsupportive they would be, I knew that was the best route for me.
Hmm.
So they weren't mad at me for choosing that though, but they want the best for you at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
their knowledge of what is best for you is having the highest paying job,
Hmm.
um, or the most rewarding job, which in this case would be doctor or lawyer or some
Yeah.
sort, but not in business, right? in terms of career, I knew from CJEP that I would be in business and I would stay in business. And they've never kind of questioned me
Hmm.
um, from that point forward. Because I
Yeah.
think my decision making was so secure in myself. I showed that I was so secure in that decision that that made them feel comfortable and not
Mm.
question if my decision was wrong or right.
Yeah. And you also worked at a bank for some time, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I worked at a bank for 4 years, part time and then sometime full time in the summer.
Hmm.
But I worked in finance and I really liked it as a part time job. But over time, I knew because I wasn't studying business finance, I was studying business marketing. So
Hmm.
I knew finance was just a good to have on my resume and it was a good knowledge. But I knew it wasn't my department. It would be mostly
Hmm.
marketing.
And that's why you transitioned into advertising.
Yes. So I knew I always loved business, but I'm
Hmm.
also creative as well as an individual. So I wanted to mix business and creative. And what does that entail? So under business, there's finance, accounting, BTM, so business technology management, um,
Hmm.
and then supply chain, and then you have marketing. Under business, what is the most suited for me? I chose marketing right off the bat and I stuck with it. And I knew I wanted to work at an agency, start as my, um, first career.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I entered the agency life and now I'm doing pharmaceutical advertising.
Okay, Karen. So I just want to talk very briefly before we get into the final segment about the cross-cultural friendships. You have grown up here. You have met people from all cultures from around the world. Canada. That's the best thing about Canada. Tell me how this cross-cultural friendships has contributed to maybe again I'm going to use the word it has contributed to your sense of belonging, or how it has helped you just in your personal growth.
So these calls across cultural friendships have allowed me to be more comfortable with French, actually.
Mm,
Um, so these friends that I've met, they speak either just English or just French or both. And sometimes they would speak both language in one sentence. And so
mm,
naturally, I to kind of um, connect with them, I would do the same. So over time, it made me comfortable to switch from English to French
mhm,
in like a few seconds. And getting to know their culture and their way of living is similar to me. Because I would say most of my friends are either Asian or they're different race.
mhm,
I kind of got to know different cultures and understand that we kind of relate to each other from a immigrant perspective.
mm,
Um, and that made me feel comfortable in my skin to be around them and also be more open minded when they have issues in their
mhm.
culture, in their tradition, and how
Yeah.
they overcome it and how they portray it to their family and friends. I learned from that and I get to basically acknowledge what their issues are and then give my advice from my perspective and
Mhm,
create a relationship stronger, make bonds out of it. And I think in that sense, being open minded, they allow me to be open minded
yeah.
eventually,
Yeah.
these cross cultural friendships that I have. And being open minded, I think it's the best way to um, integrate into society.
Yeah.
Because if you're closed minded, then you'll just reject everything that does not align to your values. And I think you have to be open minded to know that there's so many different things out there to discover.
Hmm.
And there will always be things to discover as long as you are open hearted and open minded to it.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think the reason today you and me, somebody who has the roots of Vietnam and somebody who is from India is now sitting together and talking today is only and only because
Yes.
we are open-minded and we took that step to really integrate into different cultures and know about each other. And I think that's the best thing about Canada as well, where you can find people from all around the world, and it's fascinating to know about their cultures. And also it's the most amazing thing to know that there are so many similarities between different cultures. And I think I have connected with so many people only and only on the basis of the conversations, what how parents talk to us, or some conversations about the food, or like in my case, I love my Indian spices. So conversation about Indian spices is there. So
Yeah.
all this has really connected me with the people from all around the world. And I can't be more thankful to Canada for such an enriching experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because same, I feel so grateful that I was able to meet, you and these friends,
Yeah.
and have built this relationship, and that has allowed me to become so inviting as a person,
Yeah.
and feel more belonging, and allow people to feel that they belong no matter where they are.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, we love Canada.
We do. Okay, Karen. So now we're in the final segment of the podcast. I call it Beneath the Accent. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. You can answer them in one word or a sentence or however you feel like. The idea is just to know more about you. So, ready?
Yes.
So, what's the best piece of advice someone ever gave you?
I think it's not a piece of advice that's from somebody. I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
collective of thoughts that were given to me, and I kind of put it together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is to have boundaries, be kind, um, be open minded, communicate, and always listen to your heart.
Mm.
I mean, some people would say it's not always good to listen to your heart at all times, but at the end of the day, I guess listen to your gut feeling. Um, there is no right or wrong when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I've never actually really like got a piece of advice
Mm-hmm.
from somebody. I would say it's more from like listening from like different podcasts and
From your
just
observations. Yeah.
yeah, observations, that I kind of collected these common
Mm-hmm.
advice.
Yeah. Okay. You said something about, follow your heart. That also something I say on the podcast all the time, that I encourage you to follow your heart, but also us on Instagram. The handle is My Thick Accent. So all the listeners do follow us on Instagram as well.
Yes, follow.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Is there any worst advice, Karen, that someone ever gave you?
I don't think there's any worse advice. I think any advice is good, depending on how you take it. But
Hmm.
I would say from listening to these advices that I've gotten,
Mm-hmm.
I could say that um, I think one of my friends did say at some point, like, don't always listen to, don't always take all opinions
Mm-hmm.
to heart. It's not personal. It's business.
Mm. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and I took that to heart because I take a lot of things personally. But over
Mm-hmm.
time, I kept saying that to myself, and so I don't take. So the saying is, it's not personal, it's business.
Business. Yeah.
So no, taking that advice in, I think it's good because then you become neutral to
Yeah.
everything that's being said to you. You take it in, but you don't take it personally, and you know that um, it's coming from their best of interest in that time
Yeah.
that they gave it to you with the information that they have. So whatever they say, don't take it personal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's all business, but don't take it personally,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Perfect. I like that. Is there something you recently bought and you now regret?
Okay, probably a shirt that I bought. I bought a shirt for like this summer, and it's
Mm-hmm.
pink because you know the movie Barbie came out, right?
Yeah.
So somehow I was just so into pink, and I never wear pink. I'm a very like neutral kind of person. Like I wear a
Mm-hmm.
lot of black and white, neutral colors. So
Yeah.
this shirt I bought, I never worn it. I guess that's one thing I regret. But like it's even then, it's not even a regret. It's like it's something I don't use to its fullest potential.
Okay. So, what's the most expensive thing you own?
Probably my MacBook,
So, what's the most expensive thing you would like to buy?
a new phone for now.
Okay. So, what's next on your bucket list, Karen?
Getting a promotion.
Hmm. Okay. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
So, who's your go to person when you feel stuck?
I have this friend that I go to when I feel stuck, and she listens to me when I have problems, and she tries to decipher the issue by asking me deep questions.
Okay. Are there any movies that you like to watch over and over again?
There is one, but I don't even then I don't watch it often. It's Toy Story.
Toy Story?
You know Toy Story?
Yeah.
Yeah, Toy Story. Toy Story 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah. That the Disney movie, that's one thing that I would
Yeah.
rewatch again.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
To be invisible.
For some reason, I was expecting this to come from you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How come?
Maybe it's the introvertness of yours that kind of
Maybe.
gave me a hint that it's coming. It's coming.
Yes, you thought right.
So, Karen, if you had to create this one law that everybody has to follow, what would it be?
I think it would be accept people for who they are and give them grace, give them patience, give yourself patience,
Mhm.
and know that at the end of the day, as long as we are on the same page and we are together as a community,
Mhm.
everything will turn out okay. Not sure if that could be a law.
Love that. Mic drop, I would say. I love that.
Thank you.
So, describe Canada in one word or a sentence.
Canada is welcoming.
So, finally, Karen, if you could leave me with one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say probably was repeated throughout this recording.
Sure.
But have boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
listen to your gut, never give up on yourself,
Mm-hmm.
give yourself patience and grace
Mm-hmm.
and time to be the best version of yourself.
Okay. Love that. So, finally, how would you describe your experience of being on this podcast?
I loved it. I mean, we already speak as friends, at work,
Yeah.
as colleagues as well. But this was very exciting, and I am super honored to have even get here to get to this point with you. And honestly, I am so proud of, even though we've only known each other for so little, I'm so proud of what you've accomplished and have done, and the way how outgoing you are and the way you integrate conversations with people and how you get people together just by doing these podcasts. And I think it's brave and I think it's admirable. And I'm super grateful to have met you.
Likewise, Karen. Super grateful to, come across you in this Canadian journey of mine. So thank you. Thank you so much, Karen, for being on the podcast, all your kind words and adding value to my listeners. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, listener, thank you for making it to the end. I highly, highly appreciate you listening the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't as yet, and please share with your friends or anybody you think would like it. And like I always say, we encourage you to follow your heart, but also us on Instagram. The handle is mythicaccent. You can also leave us a review or write to us at hello@mythicaccent.com. So stay tuned and let's continue knowing each other beneath the accent.